Hi guys, this is a video on how to write the equation of the perpendicular bisector of a segment. I am in our Unit 5 Topic 3 Continued Practice Packet, and I'm going to flip on to number 22. So number 22 says to find the equation of the perpendicular bisector of the segment with endpoints L and M. So there are two key things that we know about a perpendicular bisector. The first thing is that we're writing the equation of a line that is perpendicular. And we know that means we're going to use the equation y equals perpendicular slope x plus b. The second important thing that we know is that it is going to bisect our segment. And if we bisect a segment, we're going to be going through the midpoint of that segment. So bisector is telling us that we're going to use the midpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my chart. I know that I still need to find the slope, a point, and then the y-intercept. So the first thing I'm going to do to find slope, I have two options. I can use a slope formula, or I can graph my points, graph my segment, and find the slope on the graph, which is what I'm going to do now. Okay, I have a vertical change of 2 and a horizontal change of 10. So the slope of segment LM is equal to, and this is definitely a positive slope, 2 over 10, which is equivalent to 1 over 5. I could check that in my calculator. Since I need the perpendicular slope, I'm going to find that next. I need my negative inverse. I'm starting with a positive slope, so my perpendicular slope will be negative, and then I have to find the reciprocal. So the reciprocal will be 5 over 1, or just 5. So my perpendicular slope that I will use is negative 5. Next, I have to find a point. In this case, because I'm finding the perpendicular bisector, the point that I find has to be the midpoint. I cannot use point L or point M because then I will have a line that is going to go through L or going to go through M. I don't want to go through L or M. I want to go through the middle of the segment. So I have to find that point. I have two options here as well. I can use the graph, which is what I'm going to do, and just kind of eyeball it. I could verify it with my compass as well. So the distance from L to my midpoint is the same as my distance from my midpoint to M. Or I could use what I learned about partitioning from our prior unit and use a ratio of 1:1 to partition this segment. Using the graph, I can see that my midpoint has coordinates -2, +2, and so those are my x and y coordinates that I will use. Next, I'm going to find my y-intercept, so I'm going to use the equation y equals perpendicular slope x plus b, substitute in my midpoint for x and y, and substitute in my perpendicular slope. I'm going to go ahead and use and solve to solve for b. And I get that my y-intercept is -8. So b is equal to -8. Next, I'm ready to write my equation. Y equals perpendicular slope x plus b. So I'm going to substitute in my perpendicular slope and my y-intercept. So y is equal to -5x minus 8, and this is my final answer. Now I do have an option for checking my work, which is really nice. We did learn earlier this year how to construct the perpendicular bisector of a segment, and if we construct that, we can check our equation and make sure that it makes sense. So to construct the perpendicular bisector, I'm going to put my compass point on M. I'm going to make sure my compass is open at least more than halfway, and I'm going to draw a nice large arc. And then I'm going to flip my paper around, and I'm going to do the same thing from L without moving my compass width. So that's the same as I just did. And there's another one. Okay. Now if I use my straight edge to connect those intersection points and draw my line, that will be my perpendicular bisector. So I can kind of check every step of the way and make sure it makes sense. My slope of -5 makes sense. I could pick 2 points on this line and just verify my slope. So I'm going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 1. That makes sense. My midpoint makes sense. It went through that point that I found as my midpoint. And my y-intercept makes sense too. My y-intercept is where my line intersects the y-axis. And I can see right down here, it is intersecting at -8. And your graph might be a tiny bit off. You can see mine intersects actually just above -8, but that's okay. It's really close. And so therefore my equation of my perpendicular bisector makes sense.